certainly have fears that there is a serial killer at loose in Perth.
Sarah Spears, Jane Rimmer, Ciara Glennon.
And every time you saw a young girl walking by, you think, oh God, is she going to be the next victim?
Now, one man stands accused.
If police are right and Edwards is the Claremont serial killer, he's been hiding in plain sight for 20 years.
The prosecution say that underneath Ciara Glennon's damaged fingernails was the DNA of Bradley Edwards. A video of how that DNA was collected was played in court today. This is Claremont in Conversation. Welcome to Day 27 with Natalie Bonjolo, Tim Clark and Alison Fan. This is, I guess, an upsetting evidence today with the details of Ciara's post-mortem, but it's also absolutely crucial to the prosecution's case.
Well, it was upsetting listening to the details, but I suspect every post-mortem would be upsetting, and it's just that they have to go through every single step of the way to prove the prosecution's case and what was there, what wasn't, what was mishandled, what wasn't. And they did do that, exactly. We heard every single step of the body and the voices being recorded. Of course, we didn't see any of the pictures, we didn't see any of the vision, but listening to the audio was quite confronting.
Yeah, it was the grim reality, really, I suppose, today of what it entails when you have a homicide victim, and you not only have to obviously confirm the cause of death or try to, but in this case, everyone was fully aware of the importance of probably every piece of detritus on the body, and obviously parts of the body itself. And as Ali said, we didn't see, but we heard enough via the post-mortem video that was played in court to get a real understanding of what that process entailed. And and it wasn't pretty.
I think the most startling part of listening to it today is how the procedures have changed over the years. And we're talking a long time ago when things weren't as stringent, and as we've said before, they weren't aware of DNA, and how they just rinsed the various utensils when they got a bit too, he used the word slippery, because it mainly for protection of themselves, they were using scalpels, but rinsing the gloves and putting them back on again, and rinsing the scalpels and scissors when they got too dirty and putting them back on. Today, in this era of where nothing is reused, it's quite interesting listening to how it was back then.
Well, the witness was a very experienced mortuary technician. Can you tell us a bit about him?
Yeah, so this was a chap called Robert Macdermit, and he was the mortuary technician at first, but then became the mortuary manager at the State Mortuary, which is in the basement of one of the main hospitals here in Perth, the QE2 Medical Centre. And he, as he was elevated from mortuary technician to mortuary manager, he was basically in charge of the mortuary technicians, and it was his responsibility to make sure that everything that needed to be in place for a post-mortem was in place, including the cleanliness of the mortuary itself, the availability and cleanliness and sterilisation of all the equipment that might be used, and then it was also his job to actually assist the forensic pathologist to take exhibits. And in Ciara's case, he was hugely important and central to the process, because, as we heard, it was he who cut Ciara's fingernails off, and it was also he who had the onerous task of removing her hair, pieces of her hair at first, and then in fact the whole hair mass. And he went into some gory detail about how that procedure was actually done. So, and he was hugely experienced. He said that he'd been involved at some stage or at some point in probably 10,000 post-mortems over his career, and so you probably wouldn't get a more experienced mortuary technician in Australia, I wouldn't have thought. And he was he's retired now, but he'd flown in from Victoria, where he lives now, to give evidence today, and it was he and only he we heard of from today.
Now, we know that these nail clippings are very, very crucial to the case. Were there a certain number of clippings, and can you talk to us about what those clippings were and what was found underneath the nails?
Well, the defence didn't question that very closely. The defence didn't spend as much time as I expected they would, as they did yesterday. He was just mainly talking about how difficult it was to clip the fingernail, and he had to use a different pair of scissors. But I think the importance it was just what was around that might have contaminated. Justice Hall actually asked even what colour the towels were that they were used, and he said they were white, but they had a blue strip in them. That wasn't pursued either. It wasn't as intensive as I would have expected from the defence side.
No, that's true. And given the importance of this evidence, and let's make no bones about it, this is the crucial piece of evidence, the absolute crucial piece of evidence. So during the post-mortem, it had been explained and was explained more fully today that a clipping from every one of Ciara's 10 fingernails was taken one after the other, using, at first, Mr. Macdermit said, a long curved pair of scissors, as I'm sure listeners have seen in their own lives and on television. But then, because of the damage to some of Ciara's fingernails, he actually changed the pair of scissors some way through the process. And so he went from the thumbnail of Ciara's left hand, and he did all 5 on that hand and then moved to the other hand. And the first one and the third one are the most important ones, because they were the ones that we've heard were broken. The thumbnail in particular broken basically down as far as it could go, almost to the quick. And we could hear quite clearly on the video Mr. Macdermit saying to the assembled staff that he was having real trouble in getting a cutting from that first fingernail. But then you can also hear him being directed, well, go back, have another go, which he did, and he obviously succeeded in getting something, but not much. And then he proceeded to go through thumb, pointer finger, middle finger, ring finger, little finger on the left hand, and the same on the right. And they were all given a sequential number. Firstly, the clippings were all put in individual yellow-topped pots, which we'll hear a lot about, yellow-topped containers, small screw cap with a yellow top on, and they were all put into individual, so there's 10 of those. And what we'll hear a lot about in the next few weeks and months is that they were all given an individual number, AJM, which are the initials of the police officer who was collecting the evidence, and given a number. AJM 40 was the thumb of the left hand, the first one taken, the one that he had real trouble getting, and then he proceeded to 41, 42, 43, all the way through to 49. AJM 40 and 42 were the fingernails that were eventually sent to the UK, along with 46 and 48. And they were sent to the UK, to the FSS, the state-owned forensic, or the government-controlled forensic service in the UK. Many, many years later, 2008, that was when this really intensive, what they call low copy number DNA testing was done on it, and that is when the fateful DNA of this, as then unknown male, came back. And so this is why the genesis of these fingernails, all the way through to where they were stored, who handled them, who took them where, when they were opened, if they were opened, is so important, because any thought or any suspicion that there might be any reason or ability for them to be contaminated is obviously absolutely crucial to both the prosecution and the defence.
And I guess that's what you mentioned earlier, Ali, that he was asked about that. Mr. Jovic did ask about the scissors and the process, and where the scissors were moving around and what happened to them.
And what was there, things were in the background and where they were placed on, I think, on a ladder at one stage.
At one stage, yes.
Near where I think the photographer was standing.
Was he asked if they were washed after they'd gone onto the ladder before they were used again? Or?
It just seemed they were rinsed whenever the need came up. And I think Justice Hall did have a few questions also about the containers and how they were closed. Were they pressed down by hand? They were just simple plastic, or what did he describe them as? The food you get the Chinese food in, the plastic things. And just, did you press on them? Did you press on them with your bare hands? The same with the buckets. And we were shown photographs of the containers with the yellow tops and the labelling and so forth. And of course, also at the centre of all this was the hair. And he said that it was one of the few times that he had seen so much emphasis placed on the hair.
Yeah. And these yellow top containers are crucial and will become crucial, not so much for their construction, but their continuity after they left the post-mortem, how they were labelled, where they were stored, and who had custody of them at what point. And the same will go for Ciara's hair, which was this is going to be a bit graphic, but the mess. Mr. Macdermit described how rather than it being cut away, it was actually peeled away, and then a string was placed on the back of the hair to show where it had been close to the neck, and then it was placed in a bag, which was then placed in a bucket, and this exactly the same as the fingernails. This will become crucial in continuity-wise because of all the fibres that the prosecution say were later, much later, found to have come from Ciara's hair, both blue and grey, which relates to the work pants and to the car.
And yesterday, of course, we talked about the journey of that hair and how far it went and where it went around the world. We also heard in an earlier podcast this week that a mass of Jane Rimmer's hair had been shampooed and given to the family.
I don't think a mass. I don't think.
Well, that was the lock of hair.
A lock of hair. Yeah, a lock of hair. Part of it. Yeah. In an act of compassion. Did you find out today where anything similar happened for the Glennon family?
We did, and we didn't. It was certainly mentioned, and there was a receipt of a portion of hair that had been described as being filtered. And when Mr. Macdermit was asked what filtered usually meant, he said, "Well, this is when it's taken and brushed and has all the detritus taking out of it." So it wasn't said as explicitly as it was in Jane's case earlier in the week that the police officer basically said, "Oh yes, I took it home and shampooed it and took it to Jane's family." But we got the distinct impression that this had happened again, but obviously Mr. Macdermit wasn't directly involved in that if it had happened, but the receipt that was tendered as an exhibit tended to suggest that it had.
And one of you mentioned earlier that Mr. Jovich, in his cross-examination, had been talking about the various things that he could see in the footage, and he asked about something that he could see in the background. What was that?
It seemed to be another body, didn't it? Yep. Well, we were talking about a morgue, and it's the state's mortuary that handles everyone, so it appeared that something was on a gurney in the background, and, well, that didn't follow through. I don't think they went into it. They
didn't go into it much, but Mr. Jovich definitely made a point of pointing it out that there appeared to be a body bag at least in the background of the post-mortem video, which had been pixelated as well. So it wouldn't be clear whether the judge even could see, and those who could see the video could see exactly what that was, and we certainly couldn't. But that was certainly the implication in court, that there may have been another body somewhere in the vicinity, whether that was behind a screen or another area of the mortuary. We simply don't know.
And I guess, as you said, it's what's to be expected.
Yeah.
They're in a mortuary, but it must be very difficult, I still think, for the family who would be present in the courtroom today to be hearing all of these details and all these extra details that they quite possibly wouldn't have known before.
There's only Dennis Glennon and his other daughter attending this. They obviously have the choice to be there or not, and I suspect he wants to be there to hear everything. And apart from the Glennons, the other family haven't been there.
No, but they were both there, Dennis and Denise, today. And as we've said so many times, you can only sympathise and only imagine what it must be like to hear those details about someone who was so loved by them and by so many others.
Present in court?
Oh yeah, it's been another long week, obviously, and yeah, I did glance at Dennis and Denise at points during the morning, and they were definitely there to support each other. But I think we can take from Dennis's continued presence, almost constant presence now at the trial, that he's determined to. He's been
Hear it
involved.
out, yes.
He's been involved for so long that you just get the distinct impression that he wants to see it through right to the end now, and you can only admire him for that.
You may have mentioned it already. How old is Mr. Glennon? Would he be
70s,
Yeah.
late 60s?
I don't know.
Early
I'm not
70s, late
not
60s,
entirely sure.
early 70s. And also, we were also asked today about the progress of this going, because, of course, the crucial part, as we are talking about, will be argued extensively by the various DNA experts on the handling of all of this. This is all leading up to the total DNA forensic experts, not just those witnessing the scene. And while today was very gruesome, I suspect it was just another post-mortem, and what they do for everyone. It's just that not everyone's post-mortem is being relayed publicly. But they were talking about the progress. Well,
Yeah, and it was... I must say, it's been a long week. We've got more forensic evidence to come next week concerning post-mortems, and then it sounds like after that we'll be moving on to Path West staff, and then the DNA evidence proper the middle of next month. So that will be when the whips will really start to crack in terms of the evidence that is central to the Ciara's case and obviously to the other two.
And with Mr. Jovich's questioning of the witness, was there any other details that he picked up in the video that he questioned him on?
Yeah, there was at one point he questioned why Ciara's body had actually been placed on the floor. At one point, again, we have to stress we can't see this, so we're only getting it secondhand, but it appeared that Ciara's body had been taken off the gurney and placed on a green sheet on the floor, and Mr. Macdermit explained that was purely for photographic purposes, which was why the ladder was also there, so the person who was photographing proceedings could get up onto the ladder and be able to get a picture of the
entire body
in total, in situ, obviously to record exactly what it looked like as a body in total. And then he explained when the fingernails were being cut, for instance, he was having to kneel down to do that, so then we can assume that the body had been replaced back onto the gurney when all the other examination and exhibits were being taken.
There was one other aspect which came from nowhere and was actually led by the prosecution, was what sort of car did this mortuary manager drive, and he said a Holden Commodore station wagon, which of course, as we've heard, is quite, again, crucial to this case. But
I got the impression that came as a bit of a surprise to the prosecution, because Mr. Hollingsworth, so Brad Hollingsworth, who's one of Carmel Barbagallo's offsiders, one of her colleagues, was leading this evidence today, and when it came to the re-examination, which is the prosecution's sort of last go after the cross-examination, the prosecution get to have another go. And he tried, Mr. Hollingsworth tried really hard to try and pinpoint exactly what car he was driving at that time. And Mr. Macdermit had previously said, my memory's not the best, because he's in his 70s and he couldn't actually remember. And so Mr. Hollingsworth's parting shot was, well, just leave that with us. So you can imagine that there might be some distinctly some frantic phone calls to the licensing department to try and pinpoint exactly what Mr. Macdermit's vehicle was on the 4th of April 1997, because
the fibres from the insert,
you never know, do you? You never know.
And it's interesting because you've discussed in previous podcasts that, the prosecution and the defence don't really like to ask questions that they don't know the answer to.
Exactly, and it just popped up, and our ears certainly pricked up when we heard it, and obviously it piqued the interest of Mr. Hollingsworth as well, because he did try to maybe eliminate that as a possible avenue, but was unable to. So as I say, I think we might hear a little bit more about that.
You mentioned how upsetting really that this video footage probably must have been. You couldn't see it, but Bradley Edwards could see it.
He could see it if he wanted to, but I got the distinct impression today that he didn't want to.
And why does the court usher come back each time and stand on the side of him and look to check what's coming on his screen? She does that. She's done that several times. Because that would be, if he can't see it, he's got to have the option to see it. Okay. And if he doesn't, if he can't see it, then I'm of the impression they would stop the trial and make sure he could see it, because as an accused person, you have the entitlement to see every piece of evidence that's put against you, and this is obviously quite an important piece of evidence. But saying that, again, I've mentioned it earlier in the week, and I watched Mr. Edwards for quite a while this morning as it was being played. He took his glasses off and he was deliberately not looking at the screen. He wasn't taking any notes. He wasn't. It seemed to me, and it's only my opinion, he was making a conscious effort not to have to look at that, and of course that's his right. And as we've already said, it would be disturbing for anyone to see.
That's right. Very few people would want to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So you've mentioned a little bit about what's to come. Do you know exactly what's happening on Monday?
Not exactly, but as I say, Mrs. Barbagallo was asked by the judge, how are we going, where are we at, I need just a general sort of roadmap, and so it will be more forensic type evidence next week. The one person we haven't heard from so far is Officer McCulloch, who is the M in AJM 40, 41, 42. So I would very much anticipate that we would hear from him, because he is an important, very important witness, because it was he who took custody of the samples, both hair and nail, before they went to Miss Laurie Webb, who then took them to Path West, and they were under his auspices. And there will be various maybe other mortuary staff. We don't know. There were other staff in the post-mortem that we heard names of today that haven't given evidence yet. But that's going to take about...
Including Laurie Webb?
Well, that's what we think is coming next. So then the week after next, so that will be... So Australia Day is on the 26th, which is the Sunday, January the 26th in Australia. There's a public holiday on the Monday, and then we think that week we'll then begin to hear from Path West staff, who are scientists, and Laurie Webb is very senior amongst those.
Well, that wraps up week 6 of the trial. Thank you, everyone, for your feedback and questions. We're at claremontpodcast@wanews.com.au. Thanks to Alison and Tim for your time. And Tim, you'll have much more in the paper tomorrow.
Hope so.
Have a good weekend, everyone. We'll be back Monday for week 7. Join us then.
This podcast was hosted by Natalie Bongiorlo, produced by Kate Ryan and Alicia Preedy, and recorded in the studios of 7 West Media. Audio files were provided from the archives of the 7 Network and the West Australian. Sign up for daily emails and all the latest on the Claremont trial at thewest.com.au.
Enjoying this podcast? If the story behind the headline matters to you, then you can count on thewest.com.au to deliver. For more on Claremont the Trial, follow the live blog, watch the nightly news updates, and sign up for daily email updates at thewest.com.au. Subscribe now for just $1 a day at thewest.com.au.